Okay, welcome to the unit on convolutional neural networks. This is our first kind of specialized neural network that's going to be focused on working with images, and the whole structure of convolutional neural networks are set up to work and recognize images. So we'll start working with pictures and that sort of stuff in in our data sets here. Now again, you can use other methods to work with pictures. In fact, we use just regular neural networks to do the digit recognition. But again, these are neural networks kind of optimized for images. Couple resources here that you might want to start with. One is I really like this video from MIT from one of their courses that just does a great introduction to convolutional neural networks. So like I said, this video comes from
All
their
right, so let's
course.
get started. So thank you all for coming to day 2 of 6S191. We're really excited to have you for these 2 lectures and lab today, which are...
So again, they're looking at deep learning and computer vision. They do a great job of introducing the task of vision, some great examples of different vision tasks and why vision recognition is complicated, why we just can't program some simple sets of rules in to recognize different things. They then again do a review of our traditional neural networks here, and then start working on convolutional neural networks and introducing these spatial structures and things like this. Now often MIT courses rely on a lot of math here, but this particular lecture is really good. You don't need that. It doesn't rely much on calculus or linear algebra or anything like that. So it's a really good introduction to this topic. So I strongly recommend this video. So again, that's a great video to watch after you're done with this video. Here is a good starting point with this. So what are we going to look at here and why? What's the basis of this? This really has its origins in what's called the visual cortex, the brain, and how it recognizes images. So in the back of your brain, the eye sends signals back to the back of your brain to an area called the visual cortex. And scientists have for many years been trying to figure out how the visual cortex works, and have divided it up into different layers, starting with V1 for the first visual layer, and then V2, V3, etc. And so each of these layers recognizes different features for this. So let's just look at V1. The scientists did a lot of work trying to determine what the V1 cells did. And these are often called simple cells. And what this tries to show, this diagram here shows an area in the visual cortex where you would have different shapes showing up. And the background pattern here shows what this set of cells is trying to recognize. And what they're trying to recognize is a vertical white line. And so this kind of shows the action of the neurons. Remember, we talked about neurons firing slowly when they're not excited, and then fast when they are excited. And then so these are the firings of a neuron. So when something bright is right in the middle of this visual field here, these neurons will fire a lot. Now if it's off a little bit, they'll fire some, but not very much. When it's like diagonal, these won't fire here. And if it's all white, these also won't fire. So they're set up to recognize just one band of light, a line of light in here. And so scientists did a fair amount of work with the visual cortex and measuring cells and trying to determine which cells in which area of the visual, especially V1 of the visual cortex, recognize different things here. They also then found some cells were more complicated, and they didn't just want to recognize a line, but they particularly wanted to recognize a line that was moving in one direction or the other. So while a white line in the middle or off the side would generate some signal, if a line was moving like from left to right, that would generate a strong signal, but left to right would not generate any signal. So that also there's some more complex cells in this area that are recognizing motion here, but they're all recognizing often lines or simple features like this. And different areas of the visual cortex recognize different types of lines. So one area might look for any horizontal lines in your visual field. Another area might recognize any vertical lines in your horizontal field. And then different areas will recognize different sets of lines at different angles in your visual field here. So we call these filters, and we see that there's different areas of the visual cortex recognizing different types of features, and primitive features lower on in V1, and then later on when we go up into V2, more complex features. Okay, so again, we're not going to go into neural anatomy here, but just recognize that there's multiple different layers of the visual cortex. We recognize different features and a whole set of visual features in the V1 layer, and then that feeds these simple features and recognize more complex features in V2 and so on to V3 until we're finally recognizing maybe faces or animals or stuff like that. So what are we going to do with this? Well, let's look at this visualization by Victor Powell of how we're going to apply filters, or what are called kernels, also here. So this shows an image over on the right hand side of a person. And again, just a quick review with black and white images, or grayscale images, I should say. Every pixel is just a square on the field, and it is measured in amount of brightness or darkness here. And on the left are the numbers that correspond. So if I move my cursor around, I'm in a white area you can see on the image on the right. And so the corresponding numbers on the left are high, and they go between 0 and 255. So these really bright pixels are all around 250, 254, that sort of stuff. But if I go down here to the darker areas, these will be lower areas, so like 12 or 20 or 30 here. And the gray ones will be often in the middle, 100, 150 here. So they all range from like the 200s down to the single digits, or the 10s and 20s, to the hundreds, the middle range here. So that's every pixel, every dot is represented by a number here. Now when we get to color images, what we do is we stack 3 or more of these images, and we assign each one a different color. So I often talk about RGB, red, green, blue images. So we'll have one layer, and rather than the measure of just the grayness, it'll measure how much red will be. So we either will have lots of red or very little red. Similarly, we'll have another layer that measures the green, lots of green or very little green, another area that measures the blues here. And then we'll stack those layers together, and then combining the RGB, the red, green, blue values, we'll get our color image. So again, often we're used to taking an image here, not just having a single layer, but often multiple layers of these images for different parts, like a red layer, a green layer, and a blue layer for this. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to apply a filter to this. If you've done some of the work with some of the image processing software like Photoshop, you may have seen these stuff. So what we can do is we can choose different types of filters here. They are often 3 by 3 matrix, so they have 3 numbers by 3 numbers. And what we'll do is we'll apply them to our image here. Now, what does that mean to apply them to the image? So let's look down here. So this is our filter. So you can see this is our filter is written. So this one kind of detects a bright area to the left and dark area to the right, it looks like, or a change in color at least, where we'll see that. Okay, sorry, I had to jump away. My robot vacuum started going and cleaning the house, so I had to stop that. Okay, so like I was saying, this is a 3 by 3 filter. It has a 1 to 1 on the left side, 0, 0, 0, and a -1, -2, -1. So how do we apply something like this to our image? So here I can move this 3 by 3 grid over my image in different locations here. And what it'll do is it'll calculate each pixel value here. So if I go like over here, where again my left side is in a bright and my right side is kind of in dark, this is what the filter tries to recognize. So what it does is that the first column of numbers, the -1 to 1, so like this one, -1 to 1, when I move it over here, it's taking 255 times 1, and then below that the next pixel down is a little grayer and it's 232 times 2, and then going down it's even more grayer, it's 118 times 1 here. And so it multiplies those and adds them up, and then in the middle kind of column is all 0. So we have 104 times 0, which is 0, 51 times 0 is 0, and then 11 times 0. So actually it just ignores that middle column. They're all multiplied by 0. But the right column, it's looking for possible dark area. So it's taking 255 times -1, and 12 times -2, and 27 times -1. And so if we total up all those values, we get 761, which is that image here. And you can kind of see the corresponding pixel on the right side of the image is bright, meaning this is a high value here. Now if I move this somewhere else, let's say I move this so it's almost all white here, there, then I don't get much, because I get my 255 times 1, 255 times 2, and 255 times 1 on the left side, which gives me a lot of value. But on the right side, I get a 255 times -1, a 255 times -2, 255 times -1, which basically balances out. So my whole score is just 3. So rather than like here, let's go back here, where my score was like here, 761, when it's all pretty well the same, my scores are relatively low here. Similarly, if I go somewhere where it's dark on the right side and light on the left side, no, dark on the right, yeah, and light on the left side, then my score is really negative here. So if I take my filter and apply it, I get a negative 806. So we go through and we apply. We start at this corner generally, calculate this value, and then shift over 1 and calculate the value again, and shift over 1 and shift over 1. So we're repeatedly applying this filter to our image and doing this calculation. And again, we're recording this so we get a new image, which is the results of this. Now images, remember, want a value between 0 and 255. So what we do is we just, if the numbers are above 255, we just truncate it to 255. So like this value was 761. So we would just truncate that to 255. Similarly, we don't have negative values. So some of these values that are negative, they're just left, instead of negative 806, we'll just let them at 0. 0 is the lowest we can go here. So this is the new image we have. Again, this tries to recognize areas that are bright on one side and dark on the other side for this. And now we could actually try different filters. This is the left Sobel filter. We could try some other filters here, like the emboss filter or the bottom Sobel, which again is recognizing more vertical lines in this. So again, what we're going to do is define these different filters and apply them. And you may have seen this. I mean, you're probably familiar with filters on images or videos or stuff like that. Those are more complicated often filters. These are the basic filters that are just recognizing really low level features like lines and vertical lines, horizontal lines, lines at different things, circles, that sort of stuff. But from this, we could build up more complicated filters. So once we have these images, we could build up more complicated filters and build on that. So okay, so we can kind of see how the filter moves. Now some questions we have is that when we're applying a filter, we apply it to a location and we're going to shift it, let's say, to the left. Do we shift it 1 to the left, or 2 to the left, or 3 to the left? How many do we shift before we apply that filter again? Also, what do we do up at the corner? If we want to do the very corner, the areas around this aren't defined. You can see the question marks in our filter. So how do we do that? And we usually talk about some padding. We actually put around the image some blank or some extra padded pixels so that we can apply the filter maybe right up to the corner. So the question is, do we do padding or not? So those are some questions we'll have to worry about when we're applying this filter here. So again, this is, you can actually choose a file, enter or choose one of these images or filter types and apply that to this image. Okay, so that's the general idea of kernels that we're applying to images. Now, originally we built our own filters, and there was a lot of work. So Sobel did this edge detector. There were lots of other ones, and we would create our own filters and build it up. I remember having to program face recognition systems where I'd build up a whole set of filters to try to recognize faces, and you try to look at that, and then what higher level features might be built on the lower level filters to recognize faces. But that turns out to be surprisingly difficult for us to do for that. So we're going to have our neural network learn these filters itself rather than program the filters into our system. We're just going to set up the filters and randomly kind of generate them and have them learn what filters to use for this. And again, two things we're going to watch is the padding. Do we do zero padding around the edges or something else around the edges? And then stride, that's how much we shift the filter over before we apply it again. Typically a stride is 1, so you just move over 1 pixel and apply the filter again. When you do that, your resulting image is about the same size as the original. Another thing we will do at times though is do a stride of 2, so that will mean so here we would apply this filter right to the corner, and then we'd shift over 1, 2, and then apply the filter again, and 1, 2 steps and apply the filter again, 2 steps and apply the filter again. If you do that, your image turns out to get about half the size of the original image here, because again, you're always moving over 2 pixels in order to generate 1 pixel. And again, sometimes we'll want to do that. We'll use a stride of 2 to cut the image size basically in half. So, okay, so what does this have to do with convolutional neural networks? So we're going to look at this deep science blog posting, kind of trying to explain convolutional neural networks as a starting point. Here. So this tries to motivate convolutional neural networks as trying to recognize images. That's what we're kind of going for. Also, we'll be using these convolutional neural networks not to recognize just if this is a giraffe or not, but to categorize things, to draw a box and say this is a car, this is a dog. So neural networks can often, convolutional neural networks can kind of do this sort of stuff. This is a person and this is a horse. And again, you can actually see how confident the neural network is. So it's 99% sure that is a person here. For that. So okay, so how does this work up? So again, this was created back in the 1990s with this LeNet architecture based on these layers that were set up to recognize like these images. So what do these layers do? Okay, so just a quick background. Remember, our images are made up of digits, between each pixel is a value between 0 and 255, and again with colors we have multiple layers here, and we're going to apply different filters. So the first thing we're going to look at is convolutional filters. This is what we've kind of been looking at so far. So maybe this is our image, and here they're just using an image of zeros and ones just for simplicity. And here's our 3x3 filter or matrix that we're applying through it. And again, this has ones on the diagonals and zeros on the edges, kind of a weird filter. So now we're going to apply this filter. We're going to convolute it over the edge. So you can kind of see in this animation that it starts and applies it to the top left and shifts it over one, applies it to next. And every time it shifts it over one, it generates a new result. So we're able to create a convoluted image here of this. result. Now we don't have any padding around the edges, so we lose a pixel on the left and a pixel on the right and top and bottom. So although we start with a 5 by 5 image, we end up with a 3 by 3 image. But again, if this were a large image, if this was a 200 by 200 image, we'd end up with an image about the same size, a 198 by 198 image. Here as far as pixel size, because again we're shifting it over just one each time. So again, you can kind of see it shows the multiplications. Every pixel here is multiplied by the corresponding value in the filter here. So this top left corner might be multiplied by this 1, and then the next one down might be applied by this 0. In the same way that this filter did the same thing, where we can move this over. But again, we're just starting here, and we're going to apply it and shift over 1, apply it, shift over 1, apply it, and that's just, now we're going to go through the whole thing and come back and shift it down 1 and apply it again and again. So that's what this is just trying to show, is that sort of application. So we call that a convolution applying a filter, and we'll have these convolution layers that will do this for this. Some things we'll have to ask is how many do we want to do padding, and then the stride, how much do we want to shift it over. How big should the filter here be? Here's a 3 by 3 filter, but we could easily do this with 5 by 5 or 7 by 7 filters. We often do odd number filters so that there's a center pixel, because then we kind of, in our map here of the output, we put that in the center location. So often we use an odd number for our filter sizes here. We'll actually see 1 by 1 filters, and there's actually some research now on those. Sorry, my cat's in the room and wanting some attention. So if you hear a little meow in the background, that's her. She is perfectly fine and healthy. So she just needs some attention. Okay. So besides these convolutional layers, we'll look at some other layers for this. Okay, so we're going to look at the next type of filters, but they're called pooling filters. But you might want to go through this article. This talks about, again, different types of filters that can be applied here to the image. Another example of applying this to the input and getting the feature map. Again, it talks about the different parameters we want to set. The depth, that's how many different types of filters we want to apply to an image to get it to recognize. So often we'll apply maybe a dozen different filters to an image, and so we'll get a feature map or a resulting layer set, which is a whole bunch of different features layered on top of each other here. We can talk about the stride of an image. So that's again how much we're doing, and again whether or not we're padding the image on the edge here. They also introduced this rectified linear unit, which we've mentioned before, which is the unit we are going to use in here to calculate. So this is kind of our squashing function. When we sum the inputs, we squash it together, and so this is in that. We've been using this for a lot as our squashing function, even though it doesn't squash too much for this. Okay, so then we get down to our next type of filter, which our layer is called a pooling layer. So at times we're going to want to bring our layers together and create more complex features. And the idea of this is that if you're recognizing, let's say, faces on an image, or you're recognizing vertical lines on the image, there are probably going to be lots of vertical lines spread all over the image. So you'll need lots of representations, of those. But there's probably few faces, so you can shrink your image down when you're recognizing more complex features here. And the pooling layers what are going to do that. We often use what is called a max pooling feature, and that is applying a 2 by 2 grid or filter to our image, and it simply takes the largest element from that map here. So again, here we might apply a pooling max filter. So we'll apply it at this 2 by 2 area, and we'll find the largest value, 1, 1, 5, 6, the largest value 6, so we'll put 6 here. And now we'll shift over 2. We'll have a stride of 2, and our filter is 2. Interesting. And so then we'll apply this again, and so the max of these green ones is 8. We'll put that over here. Then we'll shift back down, and again we're doing a stride of 2. And here's the strongest, the highest, largest number is 3. Put that here and shift over to the right, and the largest value is 4. So what this does is it'll shrink our image in half here. So we'll go from a 4 by 4 image to a 2 by 2 image. And again, if we had a 200 by 200 image, it would shrink it down to a 100 by 100. Basically, again, we might sometimes we have to ask for if padding or something like that is needed, but generally we don't do padding with this sort of a pooling filter for this. So again, all it's doing is finding the largest element in the size, and often again we're using a 2 by 2 grid. You don't have to do this, but it's a very common operation for this. So again, often what we'll do is we'll take our input image, we'll apply a whole set of filters, convolutional filters, and generate a whole bunch of different layers. One layer might represent one type of feature like vertical lines, another layer might have another type of feature like horizontal lines, another might be a different type of feature. So each of these layers will have a single filter that will be used. This whole that filter will be applied, or kernel will be applied to this whole image, and will generate a new basic image about the same size that is just recognizing that feature. And we'll do that multiple times for multiple different features here. Now we'll take these multiple different places and we'll do this pooling layer to this, and so we'll apply our 2 by 2 pooling layer. It will look through this and figure out the max of each layer for this. And it actually does this to every layer of this. So if there are 3 layers here, our pooling layer will end up with 3 layers also, but it'll be half the size if we use a stride of 2 here. And so we'll find the max. So again, what's often looking for is if, let's say, there's a recognize a feature like a face. If there's a face in this area of the image, that value will be translated because that'll be a high value, and one of the pixels will be high, one of the feature areas will be high, and then this will also be high using the max pooling feature. So those are our 2 basic layers that we'll be using to start with. It's convolutional layers and pooling layers, and we often are going to group those together. So we'll start with our image. It might be a color image, and we might have 3 layers, an RGB layer. We'll apply a whole set of convolutional filters to it, 3 by 3 filters often, and generate. So maybe we'll get here 3 different layers of filters. We'll do a pooling layer, which will shrink this in half. We'll have half the size here, and then we'll apply a new set of filters to this set of images. So these are kind of higher level feature detection images, or things, and then from that we'll detect even more complex, and so apply a set of filters, and maybe we'll apply more filters here to recognize more complex objects or features. So maybe we'll have 6 or 7 features here, and again we'll do max pooling again, and then eventually then we'll get this down and we'll apply a traditional neural network. So eventually we'll switch to a traditional fully connected, 1 or 2 fully connected layers, and then some output that's going to recognize that this is a dog or a cat or a boat or a bird here. So that's our general structure for this. As we go, we generally start with large images, but not so many layers. And as we shrink the image down, we actually generally add the number of layers. So we're detecting more features, but there are less pixels for each feature layer. And we get down to some point where then the images are so small it doesn't make sense to keep making them smaller, and then we switch to fully connected layers, more of a traditional neural network for this. So that's how we're generally talking. So this is talking about that sort of stuff and how this works. So again, we don't want to worry about the training. The propagation training, that is basically the same, although it is interesting that we do restrict training here so that each layer has its own filter. So the way the image there, we don't have near as many connections generally here, because the filter here, this whole image will use the same filter to connect to this, but we are learning all these filters and how they're set up for this. Okay, so let's look a little bit at how this works. We're going to look at this version of running this in our browser here. We've already looked at the MINCE data set, so I'm going to look at this one, the CIFAR 10 data set. This is another real common data set. It has 10 different types of features. Each object has only one feature, so there are like dogs, cats, horses, that sort of stuff. And this is our network here. Isn't exactly how we'll structure it, but it's similar. This sets up an input layer here. And our images are really small, 32 by 32 pixels, and they're color, so the depth is 3 here. And then we're going to create a convolutional neural net layer here with a size of 5. And there are going to be 16 filters. The stride is 1, and the padding is 2 around the edge, and our activation is this rectified linear unit. And then we're going to use a pooling layer here with a stride of 2 and a size of 2. So this is our max pooling layer, and then we're going to do another convolutional layer. So we'll do setups like this. So just imagine that we're doing this kind of layering setup here, and then this is going through and doing the training for this. So here's our original image. Like this looks like an airplane here, and again, our first convolutional layer is recognizing lots of different filters to this image. So here's our cat now applied to it, and we're doing different filtering, different techniques of recognizing the cat here. So this is the activations. Don't worry about the activation gradients too much, or the weights. This just shows more detail of how things are changing as we're learning more things. So again, here's our frog. This is our frog activation. So again, these are kind of low-level features. We then do some another layer where we have more features, and we're recognizing maybe more complicated features. We're doing a max pooling layer here. So this is taking this image and again shrinking it down, so it was 32 by 32, now it'll be like 16 by 16 here. And again, now we're applying a new convolutional layer in this showing. So it's not that important that you understand what this output, but I just wanted to show you that we take an image, we'll recognize a whole bunch of features. We use pooling to shrink the image down, and we'll recognize more features on that image. We'll actually then shrink it down even further and try to recognize. And so hopefully at this point it's starting to recognize, oh, this looks like a cat at this location. So it'll have some bright areas where it recognizes an object at this point here. And then we feed this through a set of fully connected layers, and we have our output. And what this is then trying to do is predict things. So it'll look at this and say, this is a deer. Right now it thinks it's a truck or a ship. Neither of them are right here. It's looking at this one, and this thinks this could be a frog or a cat or a deer. Cat's the right answer, so that shows it in green here. But it thought it could be in frog was its top choice here. And so it'll learn, and again, as it adjusts its filters and learns more and more images here, so it'll adjust its filters, the loss will go down, the accuracy will go up, and it'll learn better. So you can actually let this run for a while and see how well it goes. We'll look at similar image recognition systems going forward here, and you can kind of see how it does it. This will actually learn to recognize these images really well if you train it for quite a while. Okay, so that's, and again, when we followed the link here, I picked on the CIFAR example and looked at that for this. So if you want to look, there's also the MINCE one with convolutional neural networks. We're actually going to do that, the MINCE one, in our lab this week. So I'm going to skip that here. Okay. There's another article from Wikipedia on convolutional neural networks that goes over kind of the basics. It's not bad. Talks about some of this convolutional neural networks and some of the motivation of this stuff. It does go over some of the basic beginning architectures, and you can see even back at the beginning where LeanNet proposed this, we had images, and then we had the convolutional layers and a pooling layer and a convolutional layer and a pooling layer, and then some dense or fully connected layers after that for this. And then we built some more complicated networks, and now we have some very complicated networks here. You also hear this term tensor brought up. So a tensor is again not just an image, but actually a whole set of layers. So like a color image is a tensor. It has 3 layers, and each layer RGB, red, green, blue, and each layer is a 2 by 2, is a basic image, one two-dimensional array, but then they're stacked on top of them. And again, that's why we use a library called TensorFlow, because Google has optimized a lot of their hardware to work with this type of setup. And again, they talk about pooling layers, fully connected layers, and things like that. So last thing I like is I love this XKCD comic, just talking about what's easy and what's hard these days and how different it is. So okay, finally some applications to convolutional neural networks. We can use this for image colorization here, so taking a black and white image and colorizing it. I've actually done this with a number of my old family photos from the 1900s and 1920s and colorize them. There's websites that'll let you do that stuff, so you can learn that. Self-driving cars, it's interesting, this is used a lot for object detection here with self-driving cars, and this talks about some of that, the image recognition stuff, and how these convolutional neural networks, these CNNs, are recognizing these patterns for these systems, and how we have different cameras feeding into a graphics card, which is doing the image recognition here for this. And then so we have 3 cameras, 3 layers, some stuff sent into our convolutional neural networks and trained, that sort of stuff. So it just talks about the general idea, and again, these filters and layers that they have for this. So this is an example of that, and again, we'll look at other versions of that as we go. This is also a a program from 2016, so it's getting a little dated now, but it was on the future of artificial intelligence and talking about some of the applications of convolutional neural networks and things like this. So I particularly like some of these presentations here. You can play this. There's a video here. If you can't find it, I have a direct link to it here of the keynote going through and talking about that. So so that's a good one. Also, again, we mentioned TensorFlow. Here's a TensorFlow keynote from 2019 that just talks about some of the more recent advances in TensorFlow and convolutional neural network processing from Google's TensorFlow Summit. So that's just an optional thing if you want. But again, the one video, if you watch one thing through this, go back to this first one and watch this first one, the MIT day 2, where they're going into convolutional neural networks and a good basic description of that. So I strongly recommend you watch that video. Okay, good luck.